When his son said, "Grandpa did this," something inside him broke, but not loudly. He didn't shout. He smiled. Because his mother had once taught him, "If you ever fight, win before the first punch." The rain had been a soft, persistent thing all afternoon, the kind of weather that makes headlights smear into long, weeping strokes across the highway. Aaron Blake had been driving slow, hands on the wheel, listening to the radio for nothing in particular. It was nearly midnight when the car's tires grazed the shoulder and he saw the shoe, a single sneaker, mud-caked, half buried in the ditch like a small, pleading flag. He stopped the car without thinking. The engine died into a low hum. On the verge of the road through the sheet of rain, he could make out a shape curled against the grass. The world had narrowed to the spot where a child should not be. Aaron unclipped his seatbelt with fingers too quick and ran. Jonah lay there with his face turned to one side, a dark bloom of blood at his temple and another wet, sticky smear seeping from where his ribs rose and fell with uncertain breath. One shoe was gone. The other dangled like a limp question. He was half-conscious, eyes glassy, more skin than bone in that strange two-still way illness steals you. "Jonah," Aaron said, though calling the name felt like summoning an echo. He knelt in the mud and lifted his son into his arms, helpless, instinctive, the way a father remembers doing when his boy was small, and the scraped knee mattered more than how the world tilted. Jonah's mouth tasted like iron. His jaw spasmed. He tried to form sound and a small broken syllable came out. "Grandpa." The ambulance lights washed the trees in red and blue before anyone reached them. Paramedics worked with the efficient calm of people who carry emergencies like tools. Aaron felt the hospital become a tunnel. Lights, voices, the metallic clink of procedure, and then stillness as Jonah was carried away on a gurney. He followed, watching the small body disappear under a sheet, thinking he would wake to a laugh and a scolding for staying out too late, the way boys do to break your heart and mend it at once. But in the waiting room, the hours modulated like low bells. Doctors came and went with faces sheened by fatigue. Machines hummed in corridors as if impatient. Laura hovered at his side, white-faced, perfume washed out by worry, words tripping over themselves. She kept saying, "It's an accident. It had to be an accident." Her fingers clenched into the fabric of her coat as if to hold together every possibility he might fall through. Then Jonah stirred, eyelids fluttering like slow moth wings. He looked at Aaron with an old sorrow in his eyes, the sort of look that says a child has seen the edge of things and returned with pieces of the dark. Jonah's voice was a thin thing, but it carried a clarity that made Aaron's blood cool. "Grandpa," Jonah said. "Victor." The name hit like a shard. Aaron felt the room tip. Victor Lang, Laura's father, was the kind of man whose wealth made the town incline like reeds in wind. Polite philanthropy, boardrooms, a smile that translated generosity into leverage. He attended fundraisers in tailored suits. His name breathed on envelopes and invitations. People said he was generous. People said a lot of things when they didn't want to look for what the books and the private numbers might prove. "Jonah," Aaron said, softer than he wanted, because even now the old hope, maybe it was misheard, maybe fever, flickered like a failing light. Jonah's gaze found Aaron's and locked. "He pushed me. He said we don't belong. He said," the words dissolved into a cough. Blood bubbled in his throat and the grunt that followed became blurred and small. Laura made a sound that was half prayer and half animal, noisy, immediate, a sound meant to fill holes with volume. Her face crumpled with the beginning of something that would be anger if she let it, or a denial that would live in her like poison. Aaron stared at Jonah and felt an old lesson, his mother's phrase about precision clear and sharp in his blood. "If you ever fight, win before the first punch," he did not shout. He did not reach for Victor, did not call the name out like an accusation in the sterile hospital light. Instead, he put his hand over Jonah's and felt the small, near imperceptible grip that said, "Stay. Stay with me." He watched the monitors, the needles, the neat choreography of medical care, and he listened as doctors spoke in clinical cadences about scans and internal bleeding, and a night that would test the weight of a father's patience. When the attending physician asked for the facts, Aaron answered with the calm economy of someone listing small, necessary things. Where had Jonah been the night before? With friends. Last seen near the old bypass. Any enemies? None that he knew. Any history? No. He supplied the information like someone writing down the initial variables of a problem before calculating a solution. At home, after the ER glow had been replaced by an ongoing dull weight, Aaron stood in the hallway where Laura's perfume still hung like an accusation. He picked up his son's backpack, the zipper stuck with dried mud, and found a smear of something dark on the outer pocket. A message flicked across his mind. Preserve, catalog, wait. The tiny, sharp instruction felt less like a plan than a permission. He thought of his mother's hands, steady, unafraid, and the way she had told him not to act until he could ensure victory. Outside the house, the rain continued. It blurred the street lamps into long, anonymous lines. Inside, Aaron made coffee and let it cool while he sat in silence. The city around him kept breathing, cars, distant laughter, the indifferent rhythm of a world that does not halt for the small human collapses of other people. He held Jonah's name in his mouth like an unlit match, feeling in that quiet, a terrible and absolute calm. He would not move until he could ensure he could strike in a way that would not merely answer the wound, but close the door on the cruelty it exposed. When he finally placed his cup on the table, it made a soft, ordinary sound that felt like a promise. He would wait. He would plan, and he would win before any punch came his way. The hospital had its own weather, a kind of stillness that pressed against the glass and muted everything outside. Aaron sat by Jonah's bed as the light changed from gray to gold to gray again. Machines whispered their mechanical lullabies, steady and impersonal, and in that endless rhythm he learned to match his breathing to his son's. Jonah's face was pale under the fluorescent hum, bruises blooming like muted violets along his jaw and temple. There was a bandage on his shoulder where the bone had splintered. Every few hours a nurse would appear, soft-footed, to check vitals or change an IV bag. Aaron rarely spoke. He simply nodded, took notes, and waited for the moment the world would tilt again, because it had already once, and now every silence felt like a prelude. Laura came and went in bursts. She didn't stay long. Hospitals made her restless. Her fear came out as chatter, as orders to the staff, as phone calls to her father. Every time Aaron saw her pull out her phone, his jaw tightened a little more. He wanted to ask what she said to Victor. He wanted to ask what Victor said back. But he didn't. Not yet. On the second night, Jonah stirred. It was small, a twitch, a wince. But it pulled Aaron from the edge of his chair so fast the movement startled even the machines. "Jonah?" he said, leaning close. Jonah's lips parted, dry and cracked. His voice came out raw. "Dad, you came." "Always." Aaron's hand trembled as he brushed the boy's hair back. "Rest. You're safe." Jonah blinked, and for a moment the clarity in his gaze cut through the haze. He said it was an accident. Aaron's stomach tightened. "Who did?" "Grandpa." The word was soft, but it burned. "Said he didn't mean it." Jonah coughed, the sound scraping his throat. "He was angry, said, 'You ruined her.' Her. Laura." Aaron froze. He didn't ask for more. He couldn't. Not while the nurse rushed in at the sound of the coughing, not while they adjusted the oxygen, not while Jonah drifted back under the weight of sedation. But the name, Victor, stayed like iron behind his teeth. That night, Aaron walked outside the hospital and stood under the sodium lights of the parking lot. The air was cold enough to sting. He stared at his reflection in the window. Tired eyes, mud still dried into the cuffs of his jeans from the ditch, hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The thought of Victor Lang, the patriarch, the man who smiled for cameras, who donated buildings, who called Aaron's son with the patience of a man pretending to mean it, made his chest hum with quiet rage. Laura found him there, standing under the buzz of the streetlight. Her mascara had bled faintly. Her voice was thin. "I called Dad," she said. "He's devastated. He said he wants to come visit Jonah." Aaron turned to her slowly. "He shouldn't," she frowned, arms folding across her chest. "Aaron, this is not the time for your pride." "It's not pride," he said evenly. "It's protection." Her expression hardened. "You're being cruel. He's my father, Jonah's grandfather. He's also the reason Jonah's in that bed." She flinched as if struck. "You don't know that." "I do. Because Jonah said something while half-conscious." She snapped. "He's confused, Aaron. He needs rest, not your paranoia." Aaron stepped closer, voice steady but stripped of softness. He wasn't confused. And I know Victor. He doesn't do accidents. Laura's silence trembled like glass. Do you hear yourself? You sound insane. Maybe, he said. But if I'm right, he'll show his hand soon enough. She exhaled sharply and turned away. You can't prove something that never happened. Aaron's eyes darkened. That's what he's counting on. At dawn, he called his brother. Samuel Blake lived 3 towns over, ran a garage, and had the kind of face that made people tell him things. Aaron didn't tell him everything, just enough. Jonah's hurt. Not an accident. I need your help, quietly. Samuel didn't hesitate. I'm on my way. By the time Samuel arrived that afternoon, Jonah had been moved from critical to stable. The nurses smiled cautiously, their practiced empathy never slipping. Aaron stood beside the bed, arms crossed. He looked calm, but Samuel could read him like an open manual. You're planning something, Samuel said quietly. Aaron didn't answer. He stared at the boy's bandaged wrist. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. If I go at him now, he'll bury it. He'll twist it into another one of his stories. So I wait. Wait for what? For the moment he stops looking over his shoulder. Samuel nodded slowly. You think he'll slip? Aaron's lips curved faintly. Not a smile, but something sharper. Everyone does when they believe they've already won. He turned his gaze back to Jonah, whose small, steady breath seemed to mark the ticking of a clock only he could hear. Victor's already built his coffin, Aaron murmured. He just doesn't know I'll be the one to close it. That night, Aaron wrote in a notebook he kept hidden inside his coat pocket. He wrote the same 4 words again and again until they filled the page. Win before the first punch. He tore out the sheet, folded it once, and slipped it into his wallet behind a photograph of Jonah smiling in the sunlight, back before everything turned. When Laura came by later, her voice was gentler. Dad called again. He said he's donating to the hospital's trauma unit in Jonah's name. He wants to help. Aaron didn't look up from his notebook. He's not helping. He's buying forgiveness. Aaron, please, she said softly. Let it go. He did look up then, eyes steady, voice quiet as a knife sliding from its sheath. I am letting it go, he said. Just not in the direction you think. Laura stared at him for a long time, something like unease flickering behind her worry, before she finally turned away and left. When the door clicked shut, Aaron leaned back, staring at the sterile ceiling. He wasn't sure what kind of man he would become to finish what had started in that ditch. He only knew one thing for certain. When he was done, Victor Lang would understand what patience could build, and what it could destroy. The days that followed blurred together, measured not by hours but by the rhythm of the machines that breathed beside Jonah's bed. Each beep, each drip, each sigh of the ventilator became a metronome, marking the slow tempo of a father learning how to wait without breaking. Aaron Blake had never been a man of temper. He was quiet, methodical, raised by a mother who taught him that the smartest hunters never chased. They waited, and as he watched the slow rise and fall of his son's chest, he felt that same old discipline returning, sharpened now by grief, honed by fury. He didn't pace the corridors like Laura did. He didn't call relatives or make speeches to friends. He just watched. He observed how the nurses came and went, who asked which questions, how often Laura left the room to get air. Every detail, every movement, every conversation was catalogued. By the 3rd day, Aaron had written so much in his small notebook that the paper's edges had begun to fray. The first entry was Jonah's whisper, Grandpa, Victor. The second, a note on Laura's father's call records. She had left her phone unlocked once while sleeping on the couch in the waiting room. Aaron had seen Dad appear twice between midnight and 3 a.m. He didn't open the messages, but he didn't have to. He'd seen that kind of panic before, the kind that smells of guilt rather than worry. When Jonah's condition stabilized enough to move to a private room, Aaron requested the transfer quietly. He didn't want Victor anywhere near the boy. The nurses assumed he was being overprotective. They weren't wrong. Laura had gone home to shower, promising to return that evening. Aaron used the time to think. He sat by the window, the late afternoon sun streaking across the sterile floor, and thought of Victor Lang, the man who used money like a weapon, wrapped cruelty in charm, and built a family empire on fear disguised as legacy. Victor had once looked Aaron in the eye at a dinner party, crystal glass in hand, and said, You're a good man, Aaron. Good, but small. My daughter needs a world, not a workshop. Aaron remembered that night now, the laughter that followed, the way Laura had winced but said nothing. He remembered the champagne spilling as Victor toasted himself, as though the universe owed him applause. That was Victor's genius, humiliating you with manners so impeccable you almost thanked him for it. So Aaron smiled now, not from nostalgia but from understanding. He had seen the shape of his enemy. He knew exactly what kind of man he was up against. And men like Victor never fought fair, they fought for show. Which meant Aaron's advantage was simple. He would never show his fight. At dusk, Samuel arrived. His hands were stained with grease and dirt from the garage, but his eyes were sharp. "You're not sleeping," Samuel said. "I'll sleep when he's home," Aaron replied. Samuel handed him a brown envelope. Inside were printed records, shipping manifests, wire transfers, digital timestamps. "I pulled this from the business registry," Samuel said. Victor's company made a large payment to a subcontractor 3 days before the accident. The contractor's address? 10 miles from the spot where Jonah was found. Aaron flipped through the pages, scanning names, amounts, routing numbers. "He paid someone," Samuel said. "Whether for cleanup, silence, or something worse, I don't know yet." Aaron looked up. "Can you trace it without anyone noticing?" Samuel grinned. The kind of grin that belonged to the reckless younger brother who'd been caught stealing car parts once and never really stopped tinkering. "I can trace anything," he said. "But you have to tell me. What are you planning, Aaron?" Aaron didn't answer right away. He stood, walked to the window and looked down at the parking lot where the lamps flickered on in soft, obedient order. Then he said almost to himself, "You ever watch chess, Sam?" Samuel frowned. "Not really." "The best players don't trap their opponent's king with one move," Aaron murmured. "They make him think he's safe for 20. Samuel blinked. "So you're saying—" "I'm saying Victor Lang is about to have the best month of his life." Aaron's reflection in the glass was calm, still. "Because while he's celebrating, I'll be building the walls of his prison, one polite gesture at a time." That evening Laura returned, looking composed again, her mask restored. She kissed Jonah's forehead, arranged the flowers a nurse had brought, then sat across from Aaron with folded arms. "Dad wants to visit," she said. "He feels horrible about what happened." Aaron looked up from his notebook. "Of course he does. You'll let him come, won't you?" He closed the notebook gently. "Of course." Her shoulders relaxed slightly. "Good. I knew you'd be reasonable." Aaron didn't tell her that he had already placed a quiet call to the hospital's head of security, requesting to be notified the moment Victor Lang's name appeared at the front desk. He didn't tell her that Samuel was tracing Victor's business network, or that Maya Ortiz, his old law school friend, had agreed to quietly review Lang Foundation's financial filings for discrepancies. He only smiled. Because patience, after all, had become his new inheritance. At midnight, when Laura had gone home again, Aaron sat beside Jonah's bed and whispered, "Rest easy, son. I'll handle it, but we'll do this right." He reached into his coat pocket, took out his notebook, and wrote a single line beneath the last entry. "Revenge is preparation wearing silence." Then he closed the book, placed it back in his pocket and leaned back in his chair, listening to the quiet hum of hospital machines, the sound of a man waiting for the right moment to begin. The first time Aaron Blake shook Victor Lang's hand after the accident, the world tilted in that eerie way it does when you realize civility can hide poison. Victor arrived at the hospital in a charcoal suit that cost more than Aaron's entire car, a white rose pinned neatly to the lapel. His expression was crafted, the right blend of sympathy and dignity, the kind of face you wear when a camera might appear. "Aaron," he said, voice like polished wood. "You look terrible, son." Aaron smiled, small, polite, deliberate. "It's been a rough week." Victor clucked his tongue. "I can imagine. Poor boy." He turned toward Jonah's bed where machines hummed softly. "I'd give anything to see him well again." Aaron almost said, "You already gave something, didn't you?" But he didn't. He inhaled quietly and said, "We're hopeful." Victor lingered near the window, hands clasped behind his back, surveying the room the way powerful men do, not looking for beauty but for control. "The hospital's excellent," he said. "I've donated quite a sum to their pediatric wing. They'll take good care of him." Aaron nodded. "That's generous of you." Victor smiled. Family takes care of its own. There it was, the phrase, soft and poisonous. Aaron felt it settle like acid in his stomach. He looked at the older man and saw what no one else did. The faint glint of victory behind the wrinkles. The arrogance of a man who believed money erased blood. Thank you for coming, Victor, Aaron said calmly. Jonah will appreciate it when he wakes. Victor placed a paternal hand on his shoulder. You're strong, Aaron. Not everyone could handle something like this. I misjudged you, Aaron forced a polite chuckle. Most people do. When Victor finally left, Laura lingered in the hallway, tears streaking her makeup. You see? She said, he cares. He came all this way. Aaron's lips thinned. Yes, he came all this way. She mistook his tone for relief. Maybe this can bring us closer again. You me, Dad? He turned sharply. Laura. The softness in his eyes was gone. Do you really believe that man does anything he can't use? She flinched. You're being cruel. No, Aaron said evenly. I'm being precise. The next morning, Aaron made a phone call from the hospital cafeteria, the kind of place where anonymity hides between coffee cups and fluorescent lights. Maya, he said, when his old law school friend picked up. I need your help, quietly. Always the lawyer who never practices, she teased. What kind of help? The kind that deals with paper trails, he replied. Non-profits, shell accounts, quiet bribes. I want to know everything that moves under Victor Lang's name. She paused, her tone shifting. You're going after him. I'm preparing, Aaron said. You taught me. Never swing until you know the floor you're standing on. Maya exhaled. Send me what you have. I'll dig. For the next few weeks, Aaron built what Victor thought was reconciliation. He visited the Lang estate twice, bringing updates about Jonah's slow recovery. He thanked Victor for his hospital donations, for his concern, for keeping the family together. Each word tasted like rust in his mouth, but he said them anyway. Because every polite visit bought him more access, small glimpses into the old man's life, the staff, the schedules, the business fronts. Aaron noticed things most people wouldn't. The chauffeur, Miles, smoked on the back patio every afternoon at 4. The maid, Carmen, took calls in Spanish she thought no one understood. She was worried about late payments. Victor's foundation held board meetings that never appeared on official filings. Aaron stored every observation in his notebook. He practiced patience like other men practice prayer. One evening, Victor invited him into his study. The air smelled of leather and brandy and old ego. Sit, Aaron, Victor said, pouring 2 glasses. You've been a good man through all this. I see now why Laura chose you. Aaron sat across from him, back straight, voice smooth. I appreciate that. Victor handed him a glass. You remind me of myself when I was younger. Ambitious, steady, but let me give you a word of advice. Aaron raised an eyebrow. Please, Victor leaned forward, the smile sharpening. Forgiveness makes you weak. Mercy invites predators. You have to make peace with being hated if you want to win. Aaron swirled the brandy in his glass. That's wise, he said softly. But I was raised to believe peace isn't given by fear. It's taken by patience. Victor laughed, assuming it was harmless philosophy. You sound like my late brother, idealist. The world broke him too. Aaron smiled faintly. The world doesn't break men like me, Victor. It sharpens us. Victor nodded approvingly. Good. I like that fire. Aaron drank the rest of his brandy slowly, hiding the tremor in his jaw. He wanted nothing more than to reach across the table to ask why his son had been left to die like garbage on the roadside. But he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he stood and extended his hand. Thank you for the advice, he said, and for everything you've done. Victor clasped his hand firmly, smugness settling into his smile. Family looks after family. Aaron's grip tightened for a heartbeat. Yes, he murmured, it does. When he left the Lang mansion that night, the air outside felt colder, but cleaner. In the rearview mirror, he saw Victor's grand estate glowing behind iron gates, proud and untouchable. Aaron's reflection in the glass was still, expressionless, almost serene. He whispered under his breath, Keep smiling, old man. I need it to look real. That night, Samuel called from his garage. Your friend Maya's onto something, he said. I'll drive over tomorrow. Aaron closed his notebook and looked once more at Jonah's empty bed, his son now home, sleeping, recovering under watchful eyes. He exhaled slowly and said, "Good, because the show's over. It's time we start building his fall." It was 2 weeks later when Samuel arrived at Aaron's workshop, a converted shed behind the house that smelled faintly of oil and cedar. He carried an old manila folder and a flash drive dangling from a keychain shaped like a wrench. Aaron had been waiting. He set aside the half-finished cabinet he'd been sanding and poured 2 coffees. Samuel dropped the folder on the table with a low grunt. "You weren't wrong. Victor's got enough dirty paperwork to choke an accountant." Aaron didn't open it immediately. He watched his brother's face instead. "How bad?" Samuel leaned back. "Bad in the way rich men always are. Layers of shell companies, fake donations, charity money moved through logistics fronts. But there's more. Look at this." He slid the flash drive into Aaron's laptop. Lines of spreadsheets appeared, names, numbers, locations. Samuel pointed to one entry. "This contractor, Westfield Hauling, paid $80,000 2 days before Jonah's accident. That account's tied to a subsidiary of Lang Industrial Logistics. Same one that runs Victor's construction projects." Aaron's voice was level. $80,000 buys a lot of silence." Samuel nodded. "And there's another payment a week later. Same shell, different recipient. Driver by the name of Miles Ortega. The chauffeur, the one who smoked at 4 o'clock every day." Aaron closed the laptop gently, his pulse steady despite the cold fire blooming behind his ribs. He paid him to do something. Whether it was to run Jonah off the road or clean up afterward, it doesn't matter. The line's there. "Now you just have to prove intent," Samuel said. Aaron shook his head. "No, I have to prove pattern. Intent is emotion. Pattern is law." That night, Aaron called Maya. Her voice came through crisp, controlled. "I've been tracing Victor's foundation grants. Most of them are legitimate on paper, but the flow-through accounts, they end in tax havens. I've mapped 8 so far." He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Does that include Westfield Hauling?" There was a pause, then a soft whistle. "That's not a hauling company, Aaron. It's a shell registered to a bank in Belize. It doesn't have trucks. It doesn't have employees. Then it has one purpose," Aaron said. "To move dirty money." Maya's tone lowered. "What are you planning to do with this?" "I'm going to build him a cage," Aaron replied. "One document at a time." For the next month, Aaron built what Victor would have called a portfolio. Every night after Jonah was asleep and the house settled into quiet, Aaron sat at his desk cataloging dates, payments, transfers, photos. He cross-referenced with hospital records, police reports, and shipping manifests Samuel had pulled from the state database. His wall slowly filled with notes, strings connecting names, arrows pointing toward Victor Lang's empire. He was careful never to draw emotion into the pattern. It had to stay clinical, precise. Emotion clouded detail, and detail was how men like Victor were undone. He began with small tests. A phone call to the bank under the pretense of confirming a donation for Jonah's medical bills. The representative, too polite to question him, confirmed that Lang Foundation's Westfield account existed and was active. A visit to the diner near the bypass where the waitress remembered a car that matched Victor's make and color, idling the night of the accident. A conversation with a tow truck driver who'd found a patch of tire marks near the ditch. Expensive tires, the kind found on luxury sedans. Each piece was quiet. Each one slid perfectly into place. By mid-September, Aaron had nearly enough to move from evidence to leverage. He drove to Maya's office, a nondescript building tucked behind a row of laundromats. Maya met him in the conference room, her laptop open, glasses perched low. "You've done half my work for me," she said, scrolling through the files he handed her. "This isn't just tax evasion, Aaron, it's corporate fraud. It's embezzlement. If the wrong prosecutor sees this, Victor won't walk away with just a fine, he'll lose everything." "That's the goal," Aaron said. Maya looked at him over the rims of her glasses. "And the accident?" He took a slow breath. "Once his empire collapses, the people who protected him will start talking. Everyone Victor's ever paid to stay quiet will start negotiating their freedom. That's when Jonah gets justice." Maya nodded, impressed and a little uneasy. "You really are your mother's son." She believed patience was a weapon, he said. "I'm just finally learning to use it." Back home, the leaves had started to turn. Jonah was walking again, carefully, awkwardly, but walking. His body was healing faster than Aaron's anger. Some nights they sat together on the couch, watching old movies. When Jonah laughed, Aaron felt a tightness in his chest that was half love, half guilt. One evening, Jonah asked, Dad, are you angry at Grandpa? Aaron looked at his son, the boy who still trusted the world to make sense. I'm not angry, he said carefully. I'm patient, Jonah frowned. That sounds worse, Aaron smiled faintly. Maybe it is. Weeks passed. Victor called occasionally, always with the same measured tone. Polite inquiries about Jonah's recovery, offers of financial help, suggestions about schools and therapies. Aaron answered every call with gratitude. You've done enough already, he'd say, and Victor would laugh softly, taking the bait. He invited Victor over for dinner one evening, a test, a rehearsal. Laura beamed with cautious hope. She thought her husband was finally letting go. When Victor arrived, Aaron greeted him with a smile sharp enough to cut. Good to see you, sir. Jonah's been eager to thank you for the donations. They sat at the table, Jonah between them, the air heavy with unspoken tension. Victor carved his steak meticulously, the knife glinting under the light. Family dinners, he said. I've missed this. Aaron poured wine for them both. So have I, he said. Feels like we're building something again. Victor smiled. We are. Aaron nodded, his expression unreadable. Exactly what I was hoping you'd say. After Victor left that night, Laura kissed Aaron's cheek, whispering, You see? Things are healing. Aaron stood by the window, watching Victor's car disappear down the street. His jaw clenched. Yes, he murmured. Healing nicely. He picked up his notebook, turned to a fresh page, and wrote one line beneath the date. He trusts me now. That's when men like him are blindest. The first frost came early that year. Mornings were gray and breath turned visible before vanishing again, fragile like secrets. Aaron Blake woke before dawn every day now, not because he needed to, but because it had become habit, ritual almost. The quiet hours before sunrise were his sanctuary. He'd sit at the kitchen table, black coffee cooling beside his notebook, and think. Jonah's laughter sometimes drifted from the hallway, softer now but steady. Laura had begun to smile again, though the smiles were thin, brittle things that cracked at the edges, and Victor Lang, dear father-in-law, was becoming bold. The plan was working. Aaron had always known men like Victor didn't crumble under force, they rotted under trust. He had given Victor confidence like a narcotic, small doses, regular supply. A friendly dinner here, a congratulatory phone call there, quiet thanks for everything you've done for us, sir. The more gratitude Aaron fed him, the more Victor's guard dissolved. And in the spaces between those polite exchanges, Aaron was building something else entirely. He began investing. Small amounts, silent stakes, shares within Lang Industrial Logistics, Victor's crown jewel. He used shell accounts through Maya's contacts, proxies that never carried his name. It wasn't about profit. It was about presence. In 2 months, he held enough stock to attend shareholder meetings. Not enough to make decisions, but enough to ask questions. And men like Victor despised questions more than they feared answers. At the same time, Samuel deepened their reach into Victor's operations. His garage contacts provided gossip from truckers and suppliers. Maya intercepted filings disguised as charitable expenses. Each report, each bank statement was another nail set neatly into a board whose shape only Aaron understood. He kept everything organized in a small wooden box Jonah had once used for school art projects. On the lid, still faintly carved, were the words, To Dad and we're building things. It was fitting, he thought. He was still building, just not furniture anymore. One afternoon, Maya called from her office. You're not going to like this, she said. Victor's foundation filed for new permits, medical research grants in Jonah's name. He's using your son's accident as PR. Aaron's pulse didn't spike. His voice stayed measured. Send me the documents. I already did. He's setting up something public, a gala next month. Press, donors, the works. Good, Aaron said. Good? Maya asked, incredulous. He's parading your son's trauma for donations. Aaron's tone was cold steel. Exactly, which means every light will be on him. The brighter they burn, the deeper his shadows will show. Maya exhaled softly. You're colder than I remember. I'm efficient, Aaron said. He taught me that. Meanwhile, Victor began to invite him into meetings. They were rehearsed affairs. Long tables, expensive coffee, men in navy suits who all laughed half a second too late. Victor liked having Aaron there. It made him look generous, forgiving, magnanimous. The benevolent patriarch who had embraced his working-class son-in-law again. Aaron played the role perfectly. Attentive, deferential, the man everyone underestimated. One afternoon after the meeting adjourned, Victor clapped him on the back. "You've got a sharp eye, Aaron. You ever think of coming on board officially? We could use a man like you in our operations division." Aaron smiled politely. "That's flattering, sir. Let me think about it," Victor chuckled. "Think fast. Opportunities don't wait forever." "Oh," Aaron said, his eyes calm. "Neither do I." That night he called Samuel. "He's inviting me in," Samuel whistled. "You sure you're ready for that?" "I've been ready since the ditch," Aaron said. "This is exactly where I need to be when it collapses." "What about Laura?" Samuel asked carefully. Aaron paused. "She's complicated. She sees what she wants to. She's built her life believing her father is the safest thing in it." Samuel sighed. "And you're going to break that belief." "I'm going to replace it with truth," Aaron said. "Whatever that costs." Laura noticed the change first, the late nights, the unreadable silences. "You've been distant," she said one evening. "You hardly talk anymore." Aaron was sanding a small table Jonah had built in therapy. "I talk enough. You talk like you're in a courtroom." He smiled faintly. "Old habits." She sat beside him, voice softening. "He's not the monster you think he is." Aaron looked at her, eyes patient but sharp. "No," he said. "He's worse. Monsters are obvious. Men like your father are worshipped." Laura stood quickly, anger flashing like static. "Why can't you let it go?" "Because he didn't," Aaron said simply. "He couldn't stand that his daughter chose someone beneath him, so he found a way to remind me." Her voice broke. "You think he tried to kill Jonah to get to you?" Aaron turned away, wiping sawdust from his palms. "I don't think," he said quietly. "I know, that night he couldn't sleep." He sat at the kitchen table, the lamp throwing a small circle of gold across the notebook. He turned to a fresh page and wrote in tight script, Step 7, Integrate. Beneath it, he listed tasks: gain access to board minutes, track internal communication logs, cross-reference Victor's offshore accounts, with Lang Logistics invoices, build legal trap via Maya, delay filings, prepare evidence chain, secure Jonah's future before exposure. He paused at the last line. Secure Jonah's future before exposure. That meant financial safety, accounts untouchable by the Lang family, college funds under his own trusteeship. It also meant something more abstract. Security from legacy, from the poisonous weight of a family name that had nearly buried him. He folded the page carefully and slipped it behind the photograph of Jonah as a toddler, mud on his face, toy hammer in his hand. That boy had trusted him to build something sturdy. Aaron would keep that promise. He was building a life that could withstand truth. A week later, Victor called with pride in his voice. "Aaron, the gala's confirmed. You'll come, won't you? They want you and Laura front and center. A picture-perfect family." Aaron smiled into the receiver, his tone flawless. "Of course. We'll be there." "Excellent," Victor said. "It'll be the crowning moment of the Foundation's year." Aaron's eyes drifted to his wall of notes, the threads all converging toward one date, November 14th. "Yes," he said softly. "A crowning moment." When the call ended, Aaron closed his notebook. The plan was no longer preparation. It was motion. And for the first time in months, he felt the faintest edge of something like satisfaction. The game had entered its quiet end. The day began quietly, as most disasters do. It was cold enough to make breath visible, warm enough for danger to hide in plain sight. Aaron Blake stood at the edge of his driveway, watching Jonah kick a soccer ball across the yard. The sound of the ball against the wooden fence, steady, rhythmic, innocent, was a strange comfort in a life that had forgotten softness. Inside the house, his phone buzzed on the counter. An email from Maya. Subject, unusual activity. He opened it. "Aaron, we've been noticed. One of Lang's internal auditors accessed the Belize account logs yesterday. Could be random, could be a sweep. Keep your head down. Don't move anything yet." He reread it twice, then deleted it. So Victor's people had sensed a ripple. Not a full storm yet, just a ripple. But that was enough to make Aaron shift gears. He walked back inside, poured himself a cup of coffee, and considered what patience looked like now. Not stillness. Stillness was dead weight. Patience was control. That evening, Laura came home humming. "Dad called again," she said. "He wants to send Jonah a gift for his progress. Something expensive, of course. Aaron didn't look up from his laptop. Tell him not to bother. Her tone sharpened. You could try being civil. I am civil, Aaron said. That's what makes this all work, she frowned. What does that mean? He met her gaze and said nothing. That silence, cold, contained, made her look away first. Later that night, after Laura had gone to bed, Aaron noticed headlights flash briefly across the living room curtains. Not the lazy curve of a car passing on the street. This light stopped. He moved to the window, every instinct sharpening. A black sedan idled at the end of the block. No plates visible. No movement. He watched for a full minute, long enough to feel the weight of observation pressing back. Then, as quietly as it had appeared, the car rolled away. Aaron stayed by the window until it vanished from sight. He exhaled through his nose, slow and steady. So they're watching me now. He didn't panic. He took notes. Time: 11:42 p.m. Make: likely Lincoln Continental. Driver: male silhouette, large build. Duration: 1 minute. He logged it in his notebook under a new heading. Surveillance begins. The next day, he told Samuel to hold off on further data pulls. Freeze everything, Aaron said. They've started to sniff, Samuel grunted. You sure? We're this close. That's why we stop, Aaron replied. Predators attack when you run. So don't. Instead, he pivoted. He spent the next week making himself look harmless. He attended board meetings, complimented Victor's staff, laughed at Victor's jokes. He even brought Laura flowers. Small, simple, almost apologetic gestures designed to reset suspicion. Victor called him son twice in public that week. It made Aaron's skin crawl. But it also meant the old man felt safe again, and that was exactly what he needed. 3 nights later, the break-in happened. It was after midnight when the back door creaked open, so softly that even the house seemed to hold its breath. Aaron had been expecting it. He sat in the dark, a baseball bat resting against his leg, the notebook and laptop already hidden in a false compartment beneath the workshop floor. A shadow crossed the hallway, flashlight beam sweeping like a searching tongue. Aaron didn't move. He watched from the corner, heart steady, waiting for the rhythm of the intruder's steps to reveal intent. The man moved straight to the office. Drawers opened. Papers rustled. A few minutes later, the man cursed quietly. He found nothing. Aaron let him leave. He could have confronted him, could have taken satisfaction in seeing fear on a stranger's face. But that would have been noise. He needed this to stay silent, invisible. When the man was gone, Aaron waited another 5 minutes before turning on the light. The drawers were disturbed. The smell of cheap cologne lingered, but the important things were untouched. The decoy files, public invoices, fake spreadsheets, harmless correspondence were gone. Good. He wanted Victor to have those. He wanted the old man to think he had stolen the crown jewels when all he'd taken was glittered trash. Aaron sat down, opened his notebook and wrote, "He's scared enough to act, but not smart enough to know what he's taken." Perfect. The next morning, he made a show of calling the police. Laura hovered behind him, wringing her hands. What if it was random? It wasn't random, Aaron said. But it's fine. They didn't get anything valuable. Victor called that afternoon, full of sympathy. I heard about the break-in, awful. You and Jonah all right? Aaron smiled into the receiver. We're fine. Probably just kids. Nothing to worry about. Victor chuckled. Good, you've got to be careful these days. Yes, Aaron said softly. I've learned that. When the call ended, Aaron looked out the window again. Jonah was back in the yard laughing. The sunlight caught his hair just so, reminding Aaron of a time before blood and betrayal. That laugh was the only thing Victor couldn't buy or steal. That laugh was worth every ounce of patience he had left. That night he met Samuel in the garage. Samuel leaned against the hood of his truck, cigarette glowing like a small red star in the dark. So they tried to scare you, he said. That means they're worried. Aaron nodded. Good, fear makes people sloppy. Samuel studied him. You sure you're okay? Aaron's face softened just a fraction. You ever look at your kid and realize you'd burn the world if it meant they could sleep without nightmares? Samuel's voice was quiet. Yeah, I felt that. Then you know why I'm not done. Later, alone in the kitchen, Aaron poured himself a drink and stared at the wall of notes. The red strings, the photos, the ledgers, it all seemed to hum, alive. He pulled out his notebook and wrote 2 new lines. Next step, let Victor win something. Result, he'll celebrate. And celebration is when he stops watching his back. He underlined the last sentence twice. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that would look clean, kind, and unremarkable to anyone else. The kind of smile that could sit at a dinner table across from Victor Lang and look like forgiveness. But Aaron knew better. It wasn't forgiveness, it was the stillness of a knife before it's drawn. It was nearly December when the pattern finally broke open. Not with an explosion, but with a whisper, the kind of truth that slides out when people forget they're being watched. Samuel called Aaron from the garage early one morning, his voice lower than usual. I followed the chauffeur, he said. Miles Ortega. You were right to keep him on the list. Aaron put down his coffee, every nerve alert. Where did he go? To the Rosemont Hotel. Stayed there for 2 hours mid-afternoon. Guess who joined him? Aaron didn't answer. He already knew. Samuel continued. Tasha Monroe. Used to be Victor's assistant at the foundation. You'd recognize her. Red hair, always standing a step behind him at events. I've seen her before. Aaron's eyes narrowed. She was fired 2 years ago, wasn't she? Something about personal misconduct. Samuel snorted. Yeah, the kind of misconduct people get bonuses for. Aaron said nothing. The pieces rearranged themselves in his head. The offshore payments, the cash withdrawals, the chauffeur's sudden wealth, the hotel meetups. Victor wasn't just hiding money. He was feeding it into something messy enough to demand silence. Get photos, Aaron said. Samuel hesitated. You sure you want to see them? Yes. By that evening, the photos were in Aaron's inbox. There was nothing explicit. Victor was too careful for that. But there was enough. Victor and Tasha entering the same suite within minutes of each other, leaving hours apart. The timestamps matched the bank transfers precisely. Maya confirmed it that night over the phone. He's laundering through personal accounts tied to her. I've traced $500,000 moving in the last 6 months. Under what classification? Aaron asked. Consulting services, Maya said dryly. For what, I can't say. Unless manipulation counts as consultancy. Aaron leaned back in his chair. He's gotten sloppy. Maya hesitated. Or overconfident. Same disease, Aaron said. Victor Lang's empire had begun to shift under its own weight. The logistics company's board meetings were tighter now, full of whispers Aaron wasn't meant to hear but did anyway. Rumors of audits. Questions about charitable funds. He watched it happen without interference, the way a surgeon watches a patient's vitals after administering a slow-working antidote. At one of those meetings, Victor's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Gentlemen, he said, let's focus on our future, not idle gossip. We've built this company on trust. Aaron almost laughed. Trust. The word felt like oil in Victor's mouth. When Victor caught his eye across the table, Aaron smiled politely, as though nothing had changed. That smile had become his most effective weapon. It disarmed, misled, concealed. Victor mistook it for submission every single time. A few nights later, Laura confronted him. She had seen something on his desk, a printout of bank statements. What is this? She demanded. Business research, Aaron said simply. Don't lie to me. He looked up, tired but calm. You don't want the truth, her voice broke. Aaron, please. You're scaring me. You've been different ever since Jonah's accident. He met her gaze, expression soft but firm. Of course I'm different, Laura. I buried the man I was in that ditch beside our son. The one who came out is someone else, her eyes filled. If you do something stupid, if you go after my father, he interrupted gently. I'm not going after him. He stood, walked to her, and brushed her cheek with the back of his hand. I'm waiting for him to come to me. She blinked through tears, confused and afraid. Why? Because he always does. Meanwhile, Maya and Samuel kept feeding him the scaffolding of truth. Through their quiet work, Aaron learned about the hidden properties Victor owned under other names. A warehouse outside the city, an account in Luxembourg, another mistress in Miami. He didn't need to expose all of it. He just needed one clear pattern that would connect corruption, money laundering, and moral ruin, and he already had it. The logistics company. The foundation. The mistress. 3 lines converging into a single point. He drew it out on his wall of notes, connecting them with a thin red string. At the center, he wrote one word. Gala. That was the stage Victor had built for himself. And Aaron would let him walk straight into his own spotlight. 2 weeks before the event, Aaron visited Victor's mansion for what Victor assumed was a peace offering. The Lang estate was draped in gold lights preparing for the gala. Servants carried boxes and floral arrangements through marble halls. Victor greeted him with a theatrical warmth that made Aaron's skin crawl. "My boy," Victor said, "it's good to see you smiling again. Laura tells me you've been keeping busy." Aaron extended his hand. "I'm grateful for everything you've done for the family, sir." Victor clapped his shoulder. "You've earned it. I misjudged you before." "No harm done," Aaron said smoothly. Victor's grin widened. "Ah, that's the spirit. You'll be sitting at my table for the gala, of course. Front and center." "Family first," Aaron smiled. "I wouldn't have it any other way." That evening, as he drove home, Samuel called. "You're sure about this? Once this hits, there's no going back." Aaron watched the road ahead, headlights cutting through mist. "It's not revenge anymore, Sam, it's gravity. He built this weight himself. I'm just letting go of the rope." At home, Jonah was asleep, the soft glow of his nightlight painting the room in amber. Aaron sat beside the boy's bed, watching his steady breathing. The scar above Jonah's eyebrow had faded, but the memory hadn't. He whispered, "We're almost there, kiddo. You'll never have to be afraid of that man again." Jonah stirred faintly and smiled in his sleep. "Love you, Dad," he mumbled. Aaron closed his eyes. "Love you more." He stayed there until dawn when the first light touched the curtains. Then he rose, went to his study, and opened his notebook to a blank page. At the top, he wrote Phase 3, the fall. Below it, 3 bullet points. Expose the mistress and money trail. Public collapse before legal action. Let him confess by instinct, not force. He underlined the final point twice because Victor Lang's pride was his greatest weakness. And pride, when cornered, always talks too much. Winter came with an edge sharp enough to slice through sound. Frost webbed the windows of the Lang Logistics headquarters, coating the city skyline in glassy quiet. Inside, the conference room was warm and gleaming. A polished table, bottled water lined like soldiers, the faint scent of cedar and money. Victor Lang was in his element. He sat at the head of the table, flanked by his directors, laughing too loudly at his own jokes. His empire was humming. The gala was a week away, and in Victor's mind, everything he touched was still gold. Aaron Blake sat 5 seats down, his demeanor precise, courteous, invisible. He had learned the rhythm of Victor's world, the choreography of laughter, the timing of approval, the careful art of being underestimated. He took notes while Victor talked about vision and legacy, words that meant little and concealed much. Occasionally, Victor would glance at him with the faint affection reserved for loyal subordinates. "Aaron," Victor said suddenly, "you'll be attending the gala, of course. You and Laura, front and center, my golden family." Aaron smiled faintly. "Wouldn't miss it," Victor nodded, pleased. "Good man. You remind me of myself, you know." Aaron's pen didn't pause. "I try, sir." After the meeting, Aaron lingered by the window overlooking the skyline. The city shimmered with early evening light, gold fading into gray, just as Victor's empire would. Maya's words echoed in his mind from their last call. "The moment you push this, it won't stop. He'll fight, but the paper trail will eat him alive." Aaron had answered calmly. "Then it's time to let the trail speak." That night, at home, Laura was laying out outfits for the gala. Her voice was bright, hopeful, brittle. "Dad's so excited about this year. He says they're honoring the new foundation project in Jonah's name." Aaron looked up from his laptop, pretending to review a work report. "The medical grant?" "Yes, isn't it wonderful?" She smiled. "He's finally doing something good." Aaron's throat tightened. He wanted to tell her the truth, that every dollar of that project was a stolen echo from the same accounts that paid for his mistress's hotel suites. But she wasn't ready. Not yet. She needed to see it unfold, to watch the lie break in real time, so instead he said, "It's generous." She nodded and folded a tie over her arm. "He wants you to speak, you know. To thank the donors on behalf of the family." Aaron looked up sharply. "What?" "Apparently he's insisting," Laura said. "He thinks it'll look good. The perfect redemption story." Aaron's pulse steadied, then slowed. "Then I'll make it perfect," he said softly. 2 days later, The Lang Foundation Gala dominated the news. The press described it as an evening of generosity and legacy. Aaron read the headlines and smiled. Small, quiet, dangerous. He met with Maya and Samuel in a diner on the city's edge, away from surveillance and polite company. The waitress poured coffee while Maya laid out her laptop. "Everything's ready," she said. "The data dump, the transfers, the audit trail. Once you give me the signal, it goes live. Financial media first, then local press, then regulators. I've synced the timing to the gala's live stream." Samuel leaned forward. "Meaning when Victor's on stage patting himself on the back, half the country will be watching him unravel." Aaron's eyes never left the black surface of his coffee. "Exactly," Maya hesitated. "Aaron, once this goes public, it'll destroy him. Not just his business, his reputation, his family's name. You ready for that fallout?" Aaron's jaw flexed. "He tried to destroy my family's life quietly. I'm just returning the favor loudly." The night before the gala, Aaron couldn't sleep. He stood in Jonah's doorway watching his son dream. There were nights even now when he still heard the echo of that gravelly whisper, "Grandpa, Victor." He reached out and brushed a lock of hair from Jonah's forehead. "You don't have to carry this, kid," he whispered. "That's my job." Then he went to his study and opened the notebook to a clean page. He drew a small circle, Victor's empire, and marked 3 points around it. Greed, fear, pride. Then he drew a line through the center and wrote, "Tonight, silence breaks." The gala began in spectacle. The ballroom gleamed in white and gold. Crystal chandeliers spilled light across polished marble. Waiters moved in perfect synchronization, carrying trays of champagne. A string quartet played something elegant and forgettable. Laura stood beside Aaron, radiant in her black dress, eyes alight with fragile pride. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she whispered. Aaron nodded, his gaze moving across the crowd. Senators, journalists, business magnates. Everyone who mattered was there. The air smelled of perfume, money, and secrets. Then, at exactly 8:30 p.m., Victor Lang took the stage. He looked untouchable, silver hair perfectly combed, voice carrying the weight of practiced gravitas. He spoke of charity, of family, of second chances. He even mentioned Jonah, my brave grandson, whose recovery inspired us all. The audience applauded warmly. Aaron clapped, too, slowly. When Victor called him to the stage, Aaron moved with the poise of a man who had waited a lifetime for the right moment to stand in the light. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor said, "my son-in-law, Aaron Blake, an example of grace, perseverance, and family unity." Aaron shook Victor's hand, the cameras flashing around them like lightning. He smiled at the audience, then at his wife, then back at Victor. "Thank you," Aaron said into the microphone. "And thank you, Victor, for showing me what true legacy means." Victor preened. "We're only as strong as the people who believe in us." Aaron's smile widened. "Exactly. And tonight everyone will see just how strong you are." He stepped back. The big screen behind them flickered. At first, just a few words appeared. Lang Foundation Annual Summary Report. Then the numbers started changing. Transaction after transaction filled the screen. Offshore accounts, shell company payments, transfers marked, consulting fees. The audience murmured. Then gasped. Victor's face drained of color. "What is this?" he barked. Aaron's voice was steady. "Transparency. Isn't that what philanthropy is all about?" The screen shifted again, this time photographs. Victor with Tasha Monroe. Wire transfers, receipts, dates. The room froze. The music stopped. Flashbulbs erupted. Someone shouted, "Is this real?" Victor turned toward Aaron, fury twisting his face. Aaron leaned close, voice so low only Victor could hear. "You taught me, remember? Forgiveness makes you weak." By the time security tried to cut the feed, it was too late. The live stream had been broadcasting the entire reveal to thousands of viewers. Maya's network had already released the documents to reporters. Victor staggered off stage as reporters swarmed. Laura stood in stunned silence, betrayal etched across her face. Aaron walked past her, past the cameras, past the chaos without looking back. He didn't need to watch Victor crumble. He had already won before the first punch. That night, the news spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed, "Lang Empire under investigation for fraud and bribery." Victor's image filled every screen, frozen mid-speech, eyes wide with disbelief. Aaron sat in the dark of his study, the glow of the television washing over him. He opened his notebook one last time for the night and wrote, "Phase complete. Next, the reckoning." Then he closed it, turned off the light, and sat in silence. Not triumphant, not angry, just still. Outside, snow began to fall, covering the city in white. For the first time in years, the night felt clean. The morning after the gala broke like a gavel. Newspapers screamed headlines in bold black letters, the kind that turned legacies into epitaphs. Victor Lang under federal investigation. Foundation fraud, millions funneled offshore. Philanthropist or predator. It was everywhere. Televisions flickered with replayed footage of the gala. The moment the projector froze, the audience's gasp, Victor's face turning from pride to horror. Slow motion, dissected, analyzed. By noon, Aaron's phone had rung over 50 times. Reporters, board members, lawyers, Laura. He didn't answer any of them. He sat in his kitchen with the blinds drawn, coffee cooling untouched, watching the sunlight crawl slowly across the floor like time itself was catching its breath. Jonah was at school. Laura was at her father's estate. And Aaron, for the first time in months, had nothing left to prepare. The plan had already detonated. All he could do now was listen to the echo. By 2 p.m., the news shifted from gossip to indictment. The authorities had frozen several Lang Foundation accounts. A convoy of black SUVs was seen outside Lang Logistics headquarters. Employees were escorted out. Stock prices plunged. Victor's empire, built on greed and arrogance, was collapsing in real time. Aaron didn't smile. Not even once. He thought revenge would taste like satisfaction. Sharp, sweet, deserved. Instead, it was flavorless, muted, like water after fire. That evening, Laura came home. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes swollen. She looked like a woman who'd seen the scaffolding of her life crumble in daylight. "How could you?" she whispered. It wasn't accusation, it was disbelief. How could you humiliate him like that? In public? Aaron's jaw flexed, but his voice remained even. The world needed to see who he really was. She shook her head, tears trembling on her lashes. "He's still my father." "And Jonah is still my son," Aaron said softly. "One of them tried to kill the other. You tell me which one I was supposed to protect." She covered her face, sobbing quietly. "You've destroyed everything." Aaron stood still, letting her words settle like ash. "No," he said finally. "He destroyed it. I just turned on the lights." Laura looked up at him, eyes red. "You planned this for months, didn't you? All those dinners, those calls, you pretended to forgive him?" He nodded once. Forgiveness was the disguise. The truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs patience. She stared at him as if seeing him for the first time, and in a way she was. This wasn't the gentle craftsman she'd married. This was a man forged in quiet fury, sharpened by love and betrayal, and she couldn't decide whether to fear him or thank him. By the next morning, federal agents had raided Victor's home. They left with boxes, computers, and the image that would haunt newspapers for weeks. Victor Lang, the king of charity, led out in handcuffs. Reporters shouted questions. Victor's face remained frozen, pride refusing to die even as everything else did. He didn't look angry. He looked betrayed. And somehow that made it worse. Aaron watched it all from the television in his living room, the glow flickering across his face. He didn't record it. He didn't need to. The image was burned into him already. Jonah came in halfway through the broadcast. "Dad?" he asked softly. "Is that Grandpa?" Aaron muted the TV. "Yeah, buddy." "That's him," Jonah frowned. "Did he do something bad?" Aaron hesitated. "He made choices that hurt people. And sometimes people like that have to face what they've done." Jonah was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Are you sad?" Aaron looked at his son, the boy who had survived what Victor's arrogance had nearly destroyed. He shook his head slowly. "No, I'm just done." Days turned to weeks. The Lang name fell from every building it once adorned. Donations were withdrawn. Partnerships dissolved. Every newspaper printed variations of the same story, a family undone by its own greed. Laura stayed away most nights, torn between guilt and disbelief. When she did come home, her presence was brittle, like glass about to crack. Victor, out on bail, tried calling once. Aaron didn't answer. He did, however, listen to the voicemail. "Aaron, you think you've won, but all you did was make yourself small. I'll rebuild. I always do. You'll see. You can't destroy men like me. You just dirty your hands trying. Aaron deleted it without a word. Men like Victor were wrong about everything, even their immortality. One evening, Maya stopped by unannounced. She stood in the doorway, wrapped in a gray coat, holding a folder. It's done, she said. The accounts are frozen. Investigations confirmed your trail. There's no way out for him this time. Aaron nodded, the faintest flicker of relief passing through his eyes. Thank you. Maya hesitated. You know, I've worked on enough cases to recognize something. Revenge never really ends. It just changes shape. Be careful it doesn't become your next obsession. Aaron managed a thin smile. It already was, Maya, but now it's over. Good, she said, her gaze softening. Then start living again. Jonah deserves that version of you. When she left, Aaron walked to the window and stared out at the streetlights blinking through the snow. He whispered to the night, He'll grow up safe now. That's enough. The next morning, he opened his notebook, his map of vengeance, his gospel of patience, and tore out the last page. Then another. And another. Until the table was covered in shredded paper and silence. He gathered the pieces, placed them in the fireplace, and watched the flame catch. The ashes curled and lifted like ghosts, dissolving into light. Behind him, Jonah's voice echoed down the hall, bright and full of life. Dad, breakfast ready! Aaron smiled, small, genuine, and unguarded. Coming, buddy. He turned away from the fire, the notebook finally gone, and walked toward the sound of his son's laughter. The reckoning had come and gone, not with an explosion, but with the quiet satisfaction of balance restored, and for Aaron Blake, that was all the victory he'd ever needed. The snow hadn't stopped for days. It fell in slow, deliberate flakes, covering the town like forgiveness that had arrived too late. Aaron Blake watched it from the workshop window, the same one where he used to build furniture for clients before everything turned into strategy and shadows. The world was quiet again. Too quiet. For the first time in months, his phone didn't buzz, his email didn't ping, and the door didn't hold the weight of bad news. Victor Lang was behind bars awaiting trial. His empire was frozen, assets seized, reputation buried under headlines that would outlive him. Justice, as the world called it, had finally arrived, and yet the silence that followed felt heavier than the chaos that had come before. Laura moved through the house like someone who no longer knew where to stand. Her father's arrest had broken something in her that no victory could mend. She spent long hours on the phone with lawyers, her mother, old family friends, people who had all suddenly gone quiet when the Lang name became radioactive. One night she stood at the doorway of the workshop. Aaron didn't turn when she spoke. Do you feel better? She asked softly. Aaron placed a finished wooden toy truck on the bench. No, just finished. She stepped inside, her arms folded. He's ruined. They're saying he'll never see daylight again. Aaron nodded. That's what happens when daylight finally sees you first. She hesitated. You planned this for almost a year. Yes. Did it make you happy? Aaron turned to face her. His eyes were steady but tired. It made Jonah safe. Happiness wasn't the point. Laura swallowed. You lied to me. I told you what you could bear, her voice cracked. And what am I supposed to bear now? He didn't answer. Because there wasn't an answer that could make her pain smaller. Vengeance, even when justified, always left behind collateral damage, and in this case, it wore his wife's face. She looked around the workshop, at the walls lined with Jonah's drawings and unfinished woodwork, and said, I don't know if I can live here anymore. Aaron nodded once. I understand. When she left that night, she didn't slam the door. She just closed it softly, the way one closes a chapter that's been read too many times. Weeks turned into slow, gray days. Jonah went back to school, walking steadier now, his smile returning in cautious bursts. He didn't talk much about what happened, and Aaron didn't ask him to. Some scars deserved silence. Samuel came by often, helping in the garage, drinking coffee that always went cold. She'll come around, Samuel said one morning. Laura, she just needs time. Aaron shrugged. Time's what I gave her, father. Look how that turned out. Samuel chuckled softly, then turned serious. You know, Mom used to say we don't get to choose what kind of men we become after we've been hurt. But you chose. You never lost yourself. Aaron smiled faintly. Maybe, or maybe I just built a better mask. Spring came quietly. The snow melted. The yard, once frozen and still, began to show hints of green again. Aaron started working on smaller projects: birdhouses, shelves, toy sets for the children's hospital. It wasn't redemption. It was rhythm, a way to fill the hours without staring too long at the spaces Laura had left behind. Jonah helped him sometimes, their conversations light and practical. "How do you make it so smooth?" the boy asked one day, running his fingers over a sanded board. "Patience," Aaron said. Jonah grinned. "You're good at that." Aaron met his son's gaze, and in that small, unguarded smile, he found something he hadn't realized he'd lost. Peace that didn't need to come with an ending. Then came the letter. It arrived one Thursday afternoon in an envelope stamped with the seal of the Federal Detention Center. No name on the return address, but Aaron knew the handwriting immediately. Sharp, elegant, deliberate. Victor Lang. He sat at the kitchen table for a long time before opening it. The letter was brief. Only 3 sentences. "I always told you we were alike. You built your empire of morality just as I built mine of power. You won, but you'll die knowing you did it my way." Aaron read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it back in the envelope. He didn't burn it. He didn't tear it. He simply put it in the drawer beside his old notebook, the one filled with plans and timelines and proof, and closed it. Victor's words weren't wrong. They were just incomplete. Aaron had done it the same way Victor would have, yes. But for a reason Victor could never understand. Not for pride, not for empire, for protection. And that difference, small as it seemed, was what kept Aaron human. That night, Jonah crawled onto the couch beside him, head resting against his arm. They watched the news in silence until the anchor mentioned Victor's name. Aaron changed the channel. Jonah looked up at him sleepily. "You're not mad anymore, are you?" Aaron smiled faintly. "No, son. Just tired." Jonah nodded, half asleep. "Good. I like you better this way." Aaron brushed a hand over his son's hair, the warmth of the moment wrapping around him like quiet forgiveness. When Jonah drifted into sleep, Aaron whispered, "I like me better this way too." He turned off the light, the soft glow of the television fading to black. Outside, the rain began again. Not violent, not cold, just enough to remind him that everything broken could still return, changed but alive. He didn't believe in happy endings anymore. But he did believe in peace that stayed. And for Aaron Blake, that was more than enough. By early summer, the noise had ebbed. Reporters had found new scandals. The courthouse lights no longer burned past midnight. And Victor Lang's name survived only in legal filings and cautionary tales whispered in boardrooms. The world had moved on. Aaron Blake was grateful for that. He rose early still. Habit. The house held the same soft creaks, the same clock tick, but it no longer felt like a watchtower. It felt finally like shelter. Aaron filled his days with work that had nothing to do with revenge. He took commissions again. Small things. Tables for neighbors, cabinets for the library, a rocking horse for the pediatric wing that once bore the Lang Foundation's name. When he delivered it, the nurse recognized him and smiled. "Did you make this yourself?" "Yes," he said. "All by hand. Your son's going to be proud." Aaron only nodded. Pride wasn't the point. Wholeness was. At night, he still opened the drawer where Victor's letter rested beside the ashes of his old notebook. He never read it. He kept it there as a reminder. Victory that forgets its cost will rot. Laura returned once in April to collect the rest of her things. They spoke quietly, politely, like neighbors who used to be family. "I'm staying with my mother," she said. "I need distance." "I know," he replied. "You won," she added, not quite meeting his eyes. Aaron shook his head. "No one wins this kind of fight, Laura. We just survive it." She nodded, tears bright but unshed. "Take care of him." "I will." That was the last time he saw her. Jonah flourished. He was taller now, sure, the scar above his brow fading to a faint line. He joined the school robotics club and spent long evenings at the workbench beside his father, soldering wires and asking questions that cut cleaner than any lawyer's cross-examination. "Dad," he said one night, "did you really build all that furniture before I was born?" "I built what we needed," Aaron said. Jonah grinned. "Then we need a boat." Aaron laughed, a sound he hadn't heard from himself in a long time. "Maybe we do." It became their summer project, a small wooden skiff more symbol than vessel. When they finally pushed it into the lake behind the house, Jonah climbed in and looked back at him. "It floats," he said. Aaron smiled. "So do we." Maya stopped by one afternoon with papers. "They're converting what's left of the Lang Foundation into a public trust. The board wants you on it." Aaron blinked. "Why?" "Because you're the only one they still trust." He considered it, then nodded slowly. "If we do this, it has to be real. Scholarships, medical aid. No names carved in marble." "Agreed," she said. "We'll start with the Children's Hospital, quietly." He signed the papers. No fanfare, no photographers. That was justice. Not the kind that shouted, but the kind that repaired. In July, Samuel arrived with news. He took a plea, he said. 7 years minimum for d'embezzlement obstruction. No parole for 5. Aaron nodded. "Good," Samuel studied him. "That all you've got to say?" Aaron looked out at the yard where Jonah was chasing a soccer ball through the tall grass. "Justice isn't about feeling better," he said. "It's about making sure no one else gets hurt the same way." Samuel smiled. Mom would have liked that answer. She taught it to me. That night the lake was still. Fireflies flickered over the water like tiny forgiving stars. Aaron sat on the dock with a notebook, a new one, blank, no diagrams, no lists. He wrote a single line. "Patience built the trap. Mercy keeps it closed." He tore the page out and let the breeze take it. It drifted across the lake until it disappeared into the dark. For a long while he just listened. Frogs, crickets, the whisper of trees. The kind of music you only hear when nothing else is demanding your attention. When Jonah called from the porch, "Dad, you coming in?" He rose, brushed the sawdust from his jeans and answered, "Yeah, buddy. I'm done here." He was. Done planning, done hiding, done measuring worth by the pain of others. The justice he'd chased had found its quiet place, and the life he'd nearly lost was waiting, warm and steady inside. The heat of midsummer softened everything. Days lingered longer. Light stretched wide across the sky, and the smell of fresh-cut wood drifted from Aaron's workshop again. It had been months since the trial. The name Victor Lang no longer filled headlines. It was now a file number, a courtroom transcript, a cautionary ghost. Inside the Blake house, life had found rhythm again. It wasn't the same rhythm as before, but it was quieter, truer, like a song hummed from memory rather than performed for an audience. Aaron rebuilt the space from the inside out. The wall that once held photographs and red strings now held shelves lined with wood polish, hand tools, and Jonah's half-finished projects. On the far side, the bench light glowed every evening, the soft golden hue of peace disguised as routine. Jonah worked there most afternoons after school. He was older now, shoulders broader, his movements more deliberate. "Can I use the lathe tonight?" he asked one evening. Aaron looked up from his work. "You remember the rule." "Measure twice, cut once," Jonah said, grinning. Aaron smiled. "Good, you're learning." "I had a good teacher," Jonah said, turning on the lathe. The hum filled the room, steady and sure. They didn't talk much while they worked. They didn't need to. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was companionable. Each sound, and the scrape of sandpaper, the buzz of tools, was a language of its own, built on patience and trust. Every few weeks, a letter arrived from the prison. Victor Lang's handwriting was still neat, though the words had changed. The first letters were angry, defiant. Declarations that he'd rebuild, reclaim, rise again. But as the months passed, the tone softened. "I think about Jonah," one letter read. "About what I said to him that night. I wanted to hurt you, and I used him to do it." "That was cowardice, not strength." Aaron never replied. He didn't hate Victor anymore. He didn't forgive him either. He simply accepted the truth of who the man had always been. That acceptance was its own form of healing, not for Victor, but for himself. Laura wrote once from her mother's house. It was short, only a few sentences. "I don't expect you to understand, but I needed distance from everything. I hope Jonah's doing well. I hope you're doing better. Maybe one day, when enough time has passed, we can talk again." Aaron read it once, folded it carefully, and placed it beside Victor's letter in the drawer. He felt neither bitterness nor longing. Just calm. People heal differently, he thought. Some rebuild what's broken. Others learn to live around the cracks. By autumn, Jonah had saved enough to enter a state engineering competition. He spent nights designing a small bridge model, a simple structure of balance and tension, beautiful in its precision. The night before the competition, Aaron found him asleep at the table, pencil still in hand. He lifted the boy's head gently and smiled at the design. It was perfect. Strong where it needed to be. Flexible where it mattered. When Jonah won second place the next day, he came running home, holding the small silver medal high. "I did it, Dad." Aaron caught him in a hug that felt like sunlight breaking through the last shadow. "You did," he whispered. "You really did. It wasn't about the medal. It was about movement, forward, upward, unchained from the past." Jonah had become the bridge between what was and what could be. That winter, Aaron started a small garden behind the house. Not a grand thing, just a few rows of herbs, a handful of wildflowers. Jonah teased him about it. "You're turning into Grandma," he said. "Good," Aaron replied, smiling. She had the right idea. Each morning he tended the soil the same way he once tended his rage. Only now what grew from it was alive. Sometimes he caught himself looking toward the horizon, wondering where Laura was, what Jonah might become, how much time he still had left to teach him the things that mattered. But those thoughts no longer came with the ache of loss. They came with gratitude, for what he had, for what had survived, for what still bloomed. One evening, while sanding the boat they'd built the summer before, Jonah asked, "Dad, when you found me that night in the ditch, what did you think?" Aaron froze for a second. Then softly, "I thought the world had ended." Jonah's brow furrowed. "And now?" Aaron looked out toward the fading light. "Now I think it just started over." Jonah smiled, small and knowing. "Grandpa said things like that once." Aaron nodded. "Then I hope someday you'll say something better." The sun dipped below the trees, casting long amber shadows over the yard. Aaron leaned against the rail of the boat and watched Jonah skipping stones across the water. Each stone left a ripple that faded slower than the last. He realized that healing wasn't the absence of pain. It was the ability to stand in the same place where the pain began and feel peace instead of fear. He turned toward the house, the smell of sawdust and earth mixing in the cool air, and whispered, "Your world now, son. Build it better than I did." And for the first time since that night by the ditch, Aaron Blake knew he had. Time had done what even justice couldn't. It softened the edges. Years passed. The house grew older with grace, like the man who lived inside it. The workshop, once a place of tension and blueprints for revenge, had turned into a sanctuary of sawdust and quiet laughter. Jonah was 17 now, taller than Aaron, quick-witted, calm. The scars on his body were faint, but the ones in his father's heart had learned how to breathe beside them. It was a late autumn evening when the past came back. Aaron was repairing the leg of a dining chair when headlights swept across the yard. The sound of a car engine idling stirred something old and instinctive in him. Not fear exactly, but recognition. When he stepped onto the porch, the air smelled faintly of rain and nostalgia. A silver sedan sat at the edge of the gravel drive. Laura stepped out. She looked different, older, softer, and more human than he remembered. Gone was the polished calm she'd once worn like armor. Now there was simply a woman, hair streaked with gray, eyes heavy with the long weight of absence. Aaron didn't move closer. He just waited. Laura's voice trembled, not from cold, but from the kind of emotion that gathers over years like dust. "Hi, Aaron," he nodded once. "Laura." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind carried the sound of dry leaves brushing across the porch. "I saw Jonah's name in the paper," she said finally. "The scholarship." I wanted to say, "Congratulations." "He earned it," Aaron said simply. "All his own work," she smiled faintly. "He's like you." Aaron looked past her at the faint streaks of sunlight bleeding into dusk. "No," he said. "He's better." Laura swallowed hard. Can I see him?" Aaron studied her face. The years apart had stripped her of pretense. She didn't come to reclaim or explain or argue. She came to see. "He's out by the lake," Aaron said. "He built something there." Laura hesitated. "Will he want to see me?" "That's up to him," Aaron said gently. "But he deserves the chance." They walked in silence toward the lake. The water caught the dimming light, reflecting it like old glass. Jonah was there, crouched by the dock, adjusting the small boat he and his father had built years ago. He looked up when he heard footsteps. For a heartbeat, he froze. "Mom?" Laura's breath caught. "Hi, sweetheart," Jonah stood, uncertain. Then slowly he walked toward her. She didn't reach for him, she let him decide the distance. When he finally stopped only a few feet apart, she whispered, You've grown so much. He smiled faintly. You look different, they both laughed. Awkward, relieved, almost fragile. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a bridge being rebuilt plank by plank. Aaron stood a few paces back, watching. He didn't interfere. This wasn't his moment to shape. It was theirs to rediscover. Later, as dusk deepened into evening, Laura sat with them on the porch. The air smelled of pine and rain. Jonah told her about his plans. The engineering program, his scholarship, the projects he wanted to build. Laura listened, eyes bright with quiet pride. When Jonah went inside to get cocoa, she turned to Aaron. You raised him well, she said softly. Better than I ever could have. Aaron shook his head. We both did in our own ways. Laura looked down at her hands. I used to hate you, she admitted. For what you did to my father. I thought you were cruel. I was, Aaron said quietly. But I was right too, she nodded slowly. Yes, you were. They sat in silence for a while, the kind that only exists between two people who've already said everything that matters. Finally, Laura whispered, He wants to see you. Aaron turned slightly. Who? My father, she said. He's sick, terminal, he asked for you. Aaron exhaled slowly. That's not a door I planned to open again. I know, she said, but maybe it's one you need to close properly. That night after she left, Aaron couldn't sleep. He stood by the lake, moonlight silvering the water, and listened to the wind move through the trees. The thought of Victor Lang, older now, dying, didn't bring anger. It brought weariness. He wondered if closure was a myth, if sometimes peace only arrived when you stopped needing it. Still, the next morning he called Maya. I need to find someone, he said. 2 weeks later, he stood outside the care facility, the sky a pale winter blue. Inside, the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and resignation. Victor Lang lay in a bed by the window, a shadow of the man he'd once been. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the quiet that comes when a person finally runs out of lies. He turned his head when Aaron entered. Aaron, he rasped, voice thin. You came, Aaron nodded. You asked for me. Victor's lips twitched. I thought you should see what victory looks like. Aaron stepped closer. This isn't victory, Victor. It's what's left when you run out of enemies. Victor chuckled weakly, still sharp. They sat in silence for a long time. The old man's breathing was shallow, his eyes dimmed by years of regret. When he finally spoke again, his voice broke on the edge of something fragile. I never hated Jonah, you know. I just wanted to remind you who had power. Aaron's eyes softened. You reminded me, all right. Just not the way you meant. Victor looked up. And now? Aaron sighed. Now I understand. Power isn't what you take from people. It's what you give them when you're gone. Victor closed his eyes. Then I left you plenty. Aaron didn't answer. He stood, looked once more at the man who had been both father-in-law and enemy, and whispered, Rest, Victor. The world's already forgotten. When he left, the nurse at the desk handed him a small envelope. Inside was a photo, Jonah as a child sitting on Victor's knee, both smiling. On the back, written in Victor's old, elegant hand, Tell him I remembered the good days too. Aaron folded it, slipped it into his jacket pocket, and stepped outside. The sky was brighter now. The air felt lighter. That evening, Jonah met him on the porch. How was he? Aaron sat down beside his son. Tired, sorry, maybe. It doesn't matter anymore. Jonah looked out toward the fading light. You think people can change? Aaron smiled faintly. If they want to, Jonah nodded. Did he? Aaron thought for a long moment before answering. I think he finally stopped pretending not to. They sat together in silence. The same kind of silence that had once been heavy but now felt peaceful. For the first time in years, Aaron felt the ache in his chest ease. Not because the past had disappeared, but because it had finally found its place. The years passed quietly, the way healing always does. The town grew busier. Newer buildings rose where old ones had once leaned. And even the lake behind Aaron's house seemed calmer. The ripples slower, the reflections clearer. Aaron Blake had grown older too. His hair had silvered, his shoulders had softened, and his hands bore the callous tenderness of a man who had built, repaired, and let go of many things. Jonah, now 21, was home for a week before starting his engineering fellowship overseas. He was taller than his father, sharper in some ways, gentler in others. Every time Aaron looked at him, he saw not the boy from the ditch, not the child who needed saving, but the man who had grown from it all, unbroken. That last evening together they sat by the lake. The same small boat they had built years ago floated near the dock, tied with a fraying rope. Jonah skipped a stone across the water, watching it bounce 4 times before sinking. "You ever think about Grandpa?" Jonah asked softly. Aaron took his time before answering. "Sometimes. Mostly when I'm thinking about what not to become." Jonah nodded, understanding more than his father expected. "Mom told me you went to see him before he died." "I did. Did he say anything?" Aaron smiled faintly. "He said a lot of things. Some worth remembering, most not." Jonah grinned. "You'd make a good politician." "Never," Aaron said, chuckling. "Too honest for that." They sat quietly for a while, the air cool and clean, the smell of pine hanging in the breeze. Jonah broke the silence again. "I don't know if I ever said it enough, Dad. But thank you. For everything." Aaron turned to him. "You don't have to thank me." "I do," Jonah said. "You gave up so much to protect me." Aaron looked at the water, the faint reflection of stars trembling across the surface. "I didn't give anything up, Jonah. I just traded what was broken for something worth keeping." Later that night, when Jonah went inside to pack, Aaron sat at the kitchen table with a pen and a clean sheet of paper. He stared at it for a long time before he began to write. "To my son, if you're reading this, it means I've lived long enough to see you become the man I always hoped you'd be. That's all any father could ever ask for. There are things I never said out loud. Not because I didn't want to, but because some truths weigh less when written. When you were hurt, I wanted to destroy the world that had hurt you. I almost did. But the older I got, the more I understood. Destruction doesn't rebuild anything. It just gives you another mess to clean later. I used to think patience was about waiting. Now I know it's about choosing when not to act. It's power without noise. It's mercy disguised as strength. And it's the only reason we're still standing. You'll meet people who mistake cruelty for control. Let them. You'll meet others who confuse forgiveness with weakness. Don't let them change your kindness. And if you ever find yourself staring at someone who's done you wrong, really wrong, don't waste your life trying to make them hurt. Just build something they can never destroy. That's the only revenge that lasts. I spent half my life learning how to win. You taught me how to live instead, or..." Dad Aaron folded the letter neatly and placed it inside an envelope, marked for Jonah when I'm gone. He slipped it into the drawer beside Victor's last photograph and Laura's letter, all the ghosts of his life neatly tucked into paper, where they could stay harmless. Then he turned off the lamp and went to bed. The next morning, he woke early, made 2 cups of coffee out of habit, and watched the sun spill across the lake. Jonah came down the stairs, backpack slung over his shoulder. "You ready?" Aaron asked. Jonah smiled. "As I'll ever be." They loaded the car in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. Before Jonah climbed into the driver's seat, he turned and hugged his father. Not the quick, awkward kind, but the long, quiet kind that carries both goodbye and gratitude. "See you soon." "Dad," Jonah said. Aaron nodded, gripping his son's shoulder. "Go build something beautiful." "I will," Jonah promised. He watched the car disappear down the road until it became nothing but dust in the morning light. Then Aaron went back to the workshop, sat at the bench and smiled at the sunlight spilling across the wood. For the first time in his life, there was no plan, no revenge, no waiting, just peace. Honest, unguarded, ordinary peace. He picked up a block of oak, ran his hand across the grain and whispered to the empty room, "Win before the first punch, and forgive before the last." The words hung in the air for a moment before the sawdust rose again, dancing in the morning light, quiet, golden, and free. Years later, when Jonah received his father's letter, he read it sitting by the same lake now overgrown with reeds. The boat was still there, half sunk, half floating, like memory itself. He folded the letter carefully and smiled. Then he whispered the same words his father once had. "Win before the first punch. Forgive before the last." And with that, the cycle ended. Not in anger, but in grace, because some stories don't end with revenge. They end when peace finally decides to stay.